gentlemen, Bridgerton, jolly old England, and Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome back. 2026 has begun. Red Eyes Entertainment. Took a little hiatus after the new year, mostly because I was sick. I was going through some stuff, but now we're back and we're here to bring you some more of that television goodness. And I was strolling through the Netflix streams, and I came across this show. Now, I heard about Queen Charlotte. I heard about that show. And I did see the trailer for Queen Charlotte. Basically, like the British king, he was looking for a queen and he married a black girl. And, black people basically weren't really a part of, we'll just say, high standard society. But because this man fell in love with this black woman, it opened the doors for black people to become royalty, to become part of high society, to become kings and dukes and things of that nature. So, just based on the fact that the queen and, like the black queen and the king came together. Now, interesting enough, the show is called Bridgerton because, I'm going to say that wrong like a bunch of times. The show is called Bridgerton because it's based on one specific family. So the Bridgerton family, they're lords, like they're madams, they're of high society. And the father had recently passed away because he got stung by a bee, which means the eldest son, he's taken over the affairs of the family. They have, I believe, I think they have like 9 children in total. And their parents did this thing where every time a child was born, like the first child's name started with A, the next child started with B, the next one started with C. So every kid was named after the alphabet, which was kind of weird. Today's video and wardrobe is sponsored by user Sharon766. With no holding back, loving what she does, check out her TikTok page and DM her for all requests and purchases. User Sharon766 on TikTok. Now that we're in London, well, everyone in high, I guess it's the summertime. Everyone in high society, they come to a particular, I think it either is London or it's a city in London where everybody comes to, and I guess this is where they spend the summer because it's courting season, it's cuffing season, it's mating season. So this is the season where I guess all the women who turn 18, it's now their time to start looking for husbands, and it's the husbands and it's the men who it's time for them to try to find brides. And back in the days, because this takes place like way back in the day, back in that day, the highest honor you could have was to be a wife, to be a mother. And to this day, that's still the highest honor, although people don't view it that way. But it was all about finding a husband, finding a wife, having a family. And if you were lucky, you married into money, you married into high society, so you can get a title as well. So that's what everybody wanted to do. But when all the 18-year-olds become of age, they have to go before the Queen Charlotte, and she has to decide, I guess if they're worthy, or out of all the women, she's going to pick the one woman who she feels is the prime catch of the mating season, and she calls it the diamond of the season. Now, because the show is Bridgerton, the Bridgerton girl, like the eldest Bridgerton daughter, her name is Daphne, so she was the fourth born. Her name was Daphne. This is her story about her trying to find a husband. Her mother, they go before the Queen. The Queen sees her, and she's like, my godchild, simply perfection. She's like flawless. And then she says that Daphne is the diamond of the season, and that's the girl that all the men should go after. Now, the problem with that is her brother, being the eldest of the family, it's his responsibility to take care of his sister. Like, he resumes the responsibilities of the father. So now, the next day, all the single men who view Daphne, because again, the Queen herself said that Daphne was like, the finest woman of all the season. All the men came knocking at Daphne's door, trying to get her number, trying to holler, trying to get to know her, trying to court her. But her brother basically blocked that at like every single turn, because apparently no one was good enough to date his sister. And it got so bad to the point where like the Queen herself said that this is the woman that all the men want to get, but because her brother was basically cop blocking her, trying to find a husband, the guys basically just moved on. It was like, fuck it, we're not going to talk to her anymore. And then like her value kind of like went down. So one day she was at a party and she was trying to get herself back up into high society, but her brother was still hating. Now, a black man, he enters the city and he's the Duke. His name is Simon. He's there because his father, was on his deathbed. And the problem is when he was a child, he had a stuttering problem. His father was ashamed of the fact that his son had a stuttering problem and kind of low-key disowned him. He had an auntie who basically took him in, taught him to overcome his speech impediment. But the thing about it is he never got over the fact that his father disowned him and treated him like shit, and basically just like didn't show him any love or affection throughout the entire time. And her mother died giving birth to him too, so that was like a double sting. So now that his father's on his deathbed, his father's whole thing is he's like, "Oh, my son, you've grown up into the man I always knew you'd be." Bullshit. And then he was just like, he said, "It does my heart justice to know that you'll carry on the name, like the family name." And then now mind you, he's been shitted on by his pop since he was a baby. So on his father's deathbed, he leans over to his father and he says, "You old fool." He was like, "I will never marry and I will never have child." He's like, "The lineage dies with me. I will never have a baby." And then he was like, basically he said, the family bloodline you so desperately cling to is dead. And then when his father heard that, like, his father died. And that was the whole thing. The Duke's whole thing is he's holding on to the fact that he's never going to get married. He's never going to have children just to spite his daddy. So he goes to the same party, and while he's at the party with the Bringentons, he bumps into Daphne. Like, they literally, like, physically bump into each other. Daphne had no idea who he was, didn't know he was a Duke. When the Duke first got there, all the girls knew he was a Duke, and they started trying to get his number. They were trying to holler. But his whole thing was he was annoyed because he was like, "I'm not trying to get married." He was like, "Yo, get these freaks off of me." Daphne had no idea who he was. So the two of them bumped into each other, and they immediately didn't like each other. They didn't get along. Like, they were throwing jabs at each other, and she was just like, "Oh, you're just some self-absorbed, fool, who thinks highly of himself." And he was just like, "Oh, you're just some silly-eyed schoolgirl who's just desperate for love," and everything. Like, they hated each other, and they didn't get along. And then the whole thing is just like, it's just now this whole thing with the two of them not liking each other, and and just like throwing jabs at each other. There was even a moment where she was just like, "Oh, why would any woman want you as her husband?" She was like, "You're extremely dreadful." He's like, "You're horrible to be around," and it's like, "You're a pain in the ass." He was like, "No man would take you for his bride." And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, yeah, so basically y'all gonna be fucking at some point. I'm like, for two people to hate each other that much, or to seem like they hate each other, I was like, yeah, basically, I was like, so at what point during the season are y'all gonna start fucking? It's like, this is crazy. And it's like, awkwardly, the Duke was actually best friends with Daphne's brother because the two of them went to school together, which kind of made it worse. So he was hanging around. So he was always around them. The two of them were getting to know each other, like hating each other and everything based on the fact that, like, he was always around the family. Now, the problem is because the brother's been hating for so long, Daphne's stock went down. And she was trying to figure out, like, how could she get her stock back up? Because she said, "There are no men coming to my house to try to court me. Nobody wants to make me their wife." She's like, "I can't find a husband." And then the Duke was just like, "Well, consider yourself lucky because marriage is a sham." And he didn't want to be married. So then they came up with this crazy idea. They were just like, "Hey, how about you and I?" They was like, well, she was like, "Since you don't want to be married and I'm trying to find a husband and I need to get my stock back up," she said, "Why don't we pretend like we're courting each other and pretend like we want to be married? So this way, if we're pretending that we're courting each other, if the men see, because you're a Duke," she was like, "if the men see me talking to you because you're a Duke, then the men will think my value has returned. And if the ladies see me courting you, the ladies will leave you alone. So this way we both get what we want." So the two of them pretended to basically be courting each other. And the crazy shit is they spent so much time pretending to date, they low-key kind of really did date, and they actually fell in love with each other. Like, which was wild. But then at the end, a prince showed up, and a prince tried to get Daphne, get Daphne's hand. And then she accepted because she was like, "Well, the Duke not trying to marry me anyway." And he was going to leave, but then after a while, like, he felt some kind of way. Then he was like, "I didn't realize it, but I actually love this girl." He went back, he went to the party to try to get her back. Because once he saw her dance with the prince, then he got up in his feelings. He was like, "Nah, I actually like this girl." And so then he tried to get her. And then they were in the backyard, like outside of a party. They were talking to each other. And she was like, "What?" He was like, "Oh, you really going to marry the prince?" And then she was like, "Why do you care? Because you don't love me anyway." And then he grabbed her. They started making out. And then her brother caught her. And he was like, "You charlatan, you've deflowered my sister. And now you will marry her or else." And then he was just like, "No, I can't marry her." Because he's still holding on to the thing about never getting married. He was like, "I can't marry your sister, although I'm in love with her." And then he was like, "Then we will have a duel at dawn, like 10 paces, turn and shoot, So like they get up. So now it's like so silly. So the brother and the Duke now, they're going to fight. They're going to shoot each other over Daphne's honor. Daphne shows up and tries to stop the fight. And then she tried to talk to the Duke, and then she was just like, "Am I really that dreadful to the point where you refuse to marry me?" And then he said, no. He said that after getting to know you this whole time, he said, "I know that the one thing you want more than anything is you want a family. You want to have a family. You want to have children. You want a house full of children." And he said, and I quote, he said, I would love to marry you, but I can't give you children. Those were his words verbatim. She took that as he's unable to produce children because he's infertile. He meant it as, I don't want to have children because I swore on my father's deathbed I would never father an heir to the throne. But she took it as he couldn't have kids. And then after that, she was just like, well, she was just like, I'm in love with you, Simon. She was like, she's like, forget about having children. She's like, we shall marry. And also because back then it was bad taste for a woman and a man to be alone together without a chaperone. Because once you kiss somebody or touch a woman's hand, you've basically deflowered her innocence. And after that, if they find out that you inappropriately touched a woman that you're not married to, you were forced to marry her immediately. So, that's pretty much what happened, because they basically made out when they was in the garden. So, and then the brother caught them. So he was like, you have to marry her. But then they tried to get married. But then the thing is, they didn't want the rumor to get out of like both of them being in the garden together. So just to save the family shame, they tried to expedite the marriage and get married as quickly as possible. But because the prince was the nephew of the queen tried to block them from getting married right away. So they had to go to the queen and they had to pitch their case about why they should get married. And then it was in that moment, because the queen was just like, why? She's like, why should you get married right away? And then Simon basically came out and told the truth. He was like, look, he was like, he said it wasn't love at first sight. He said we actually hated each other, but over the course of time we got to know each other, and she became, more than a romantic interest. She became my best friend. He was like, like her laugh makes me smile. He was like, I find it easy to talk when I'm around her. And he said, honestly, I can't see myself spending my life, with anybody else but her. And then he told the queen, he was like, I apologize because it took your nephew being around her to make me realize my true feelings. So then after that, the queen was like, fine, you can get married. And the two of them got married, which makes the queen look good too, because the queen picked her to be a top catch. So for her to marry a duke was like a big deal, so they got married, and it was very beautiful and very loving. Now, the thing is, she's like Daphne, she's hurt over the fact that, they can't have kids. She's under the impression they can't have kids, but she still loves him anyway, and she's still trying to make it work. Now, the part that blew my mind about the entire show was, back in those days, no one talked to the girls about sex. So sex was something you, as a woman, you had to discover it once you were married and you were with your husband. Nobody talked to you about it. Nobody had conversations about it. One of Daphne's sisters asked her mother, she's like, she's like, how does a woman come with child? Like, she's like, how does a woman end up being pregnant? And the mother was just like, I will hear none of this talk. And then the brothers was just like, he's like, don't speak of such things. And I'm like, but my whole thing is like, how are you supposed to know something? Like, how are you supposed to know anything about life? Because like, they ain't tell you shit. But so Daphne doesn't even know how a woman gets pregnant. She's never had sex before. Like, when she kissed the duke, that was the first time she ever kissed a man. And now they're married. So now they're married. And then while they're married, basically they got to know each other more. She got to know more about his life. And then the two of them finally had sex for the first time. And then once they had sex for the first time, it was a wrap. And and that girl was busted wide open. Like, they was doing it on the floor, on the ceiling, in the bedroom, in the bathroom. Like, they was doing it everywhere. But the funny thing is, every time they had sex and the Duke got to the climax, he always pulled out. So he mastered the pull-out method, and she never really thought anything about it because, again, she had no idea where children come from anyway. But then, like, one day, like, he actively kind of, like, went out of his way to pull out during the sex, and she just kind of thought, like, his behavior is a little weird. So then she went around asking questions, and then, she found out, how he was treated by his father. She found out that, he made a promise to his father that he would never get married or have kids, but now, like, the Duchess is here. And then she just started putting two and two together. And she went to one of the servants, because we're going to call them maids. We're going to call them maids or housekeepers. They went to one of the maids or the housekeepers, and she flat out asked one of the female housekeepers, she was like, as the Duchess, I command you to tell me how children are born. And then the Duchess, and then like the servant told her how kids were born. And then she put two and two together and realized he can have children. He's just been avoiding having children this whole time. So that blew up and turned into like this whole big thing. But the thing is with her, she's still a young girl, so she still has a lot to learn. There was even a moment where the two of them, because he's a duke, so like he runs a kingdom or whatever, the two of them went to the kingdom so everybody could meet the Duchess for the first time. And there was like a pig contest where there were 3 pigs from 3 different farms, and the Duke and the Duchess were supposed to choose the prize pig. And then, the Duchess, she asked, she's like, well, what happens to the other two once you choose a winner? And they're like, well, we kill the other two. So then she was just like, no, she's like, as the Duchess, she's like, we will not slaughter any animals. And she said, all 3 animals are the prize and all 3 of them win. Not realizing the winner of that, of that prize was going to basically get like a government contract where their farm was going to produce food, goods, and services for the kingdom. Now, because she said everybody's a winner, nobody got the contract and everybody broke. So now, like, her first day in office, everybody's like, yo, to hell with this bitch, because like she causing problems. Now she done found out where babies come from and realized this motherfucker can have kids. He doesn't want to have children. And it just blew up and turned into like this whole big thing. They were mad at each other, and everything. And she was like, you said you couldn't have. He was like, I told you I was unable to have children. She was like, no, you said you couldn't have them. And I was like, no, he was pretty clear, like, with what he said. I was like, you just took it wrong. And then, then basically she found letters that he had wrote when he was a child to his father, talking about his speech impediment and talking about how he felt the way his father treated him. She found the letters, and she basically got to the point where she told him, she was like, look, she said, I love you more, because they were going to get divorced. They're like over the child thing, they were going to get divorced. And then after a while, she was just like, look, she's like, I don't know what you're scared of, but she said, like, I love you. I want to be with you. She's like, I got your back. I'm here 100%. She was like, let go of the feelings of the past, open your heart and everything. And he was like, I don't know how to do that. And, she was like, you do it with your wife. And then, the two of them finally came together. Everything was beautiful, hunky-dory, and then they ended up actually having a child by the end of the season, and then when they had a child, the child's name started with the letter A to carry on the Bridgerton family tradition. So that was basically how the first season ended, and thank you for tuning in. I mean, there were some side things. We got to know, like, other members of the Bridgerton family, which we'll talk about more, because I'm going to do a season, because, like, a 4th season of Bridgerton starts on January 29th. So I'm basically, this is my season 1 recap. I'm going to do a video for season 2 and a video for season 3. And then I'm actually going to do episode by episode reviews for season 4. Because I actually liked the show. Like, I really enjoyed it. Like, there was even a moment where his auntie, she was talking to him. She was just like, oh, the Bridgerton girl, like, she's beautiful. She'd be a good catch. And she's like, you're throwing it all away. And she was just like, you're in a privileged position to be in high society. And then he said, yes, and I must hold on to that privilege, because he said the only reason why we're in this position is because the king took pity on a black woman and opened the doors for black people to be in this position. But he said, just like that, he was like, they can take it away from us. They can take it all away from us. And he's like, he said, that would not be my fate. And and when he said that, I was like, yo, kudos to them for actually bringing that shit up, because the show isn't trying to make it seem like, oh, black people and white people, they've been getting together perfectly fine. They were like, nah, we're here by, like, we were fortunate to be here. So let's keep that in mind. And, and then the entire season was also driven by a mysterious writer who does a gossip column, a gossip magazine, and her name is Lady Whistledown. She basically knows all the gossip that goes on in the city, and it's weird because, like, the queen has a problem with her gossip, because the queen's whole thing is she picked Daphne to be the diamond of the season, but then when Daphne started, like, not getting suitors when her brother fucked it up for her, then the queen was just like, oh, it looks like the queen chose wrong when it came to Miss Daphne. So now the queen mad at that. She's just like, oh, bring me Lady Whistledown's head on a silver platter. But she's an anonymous writer and nobody knows who she is yet. Like I said, but that was pretty much it. That was the gist of the season. I mean, we did meet other characters. We did meet other families, like the Feathering family. We'll talk about the Feathering family more. We'll talk about, like, the other brothers and sisters of the Bridgerton family more. We'll talk about all that more. But season 1 was basically about Simon and Daphne, the Duke, and now the Duchess. And it was a beautiful love story. Because, like I said, because the whole thing is, in their country, people were basically marrying out of convenience. They were marrying for status. They were marrying for money. And Daphne's parents, like, they married for love. They actually loved each other. And Daphne's whole thing was she wanted to marry for love just like her parents did. And when she met the Duke, their ruse turned into actual love and turned into actual friendship. And it was nice to see that. So kudos for season 1. Like, I give season 1 a definite yay. I say the yay. It was definitely a good season, and it was an awesome season. You guys should definitely check out Bridgerton season 1 and look out for more videos as I review the entire season 2 of Bridgerton, and then review season 3, and then we'll go into season 4. So that was it, guys. So thanks for tuning in as always. So for more Red Eyes Entertainment action, because we's back, baby. Trying to bring you all this Netflix goodness and all this television and movies and video games and everything in between. But until next time, cheerio, and we're out this bitch.